Part two, loads of ground still to cover. We investigated the history of the first ever paid professional footballer, first true professional footballer, if you like, Jimmy Lang of Sheffield Wednesday. That was in part one. Ernest Needham of Sheffield United is relatively recent. He played there between 1891 and 1909, just the other week, if you like, compared to Jimmy Lang. 464 appearances. He was an England international. He was sort of a box-to-box midfield player, sort of chunky build, very, very powerful, could score goals. And we'll be looking at him through the football historian Mark Metcalf, who talked about Jimmy Lang. We'll talk about a Blades hero in this part of the show. Jon Newsome is with us, not without knowledge of the other team in Sheffield, Sheffield United. We'll talk about their fortunes and how they can revive, really, in this more difficult second season in the Premier League. And James Gregg has loads to talk about across several sports. And I like your backdrop there, James. I like your backdrop.
Thank you very much.
I can recognise your backdrop, I think. And it's always raining there, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, yeah. They call it the Costa del Salford, and I think that is somewhat ironic because it is always raining and it's miserable and there's lots of angry Manx wandering around. So, yeah, Salford Media City, and there's not a lot going on at the moment, as you can imagine.
No, there's not a lot going on over here. Sheffield's about to join you. Yeah, I suppose Sheffield is pulling level with the Manchester clubs because we're going into Tier 3. So we're in the same division, the same Super League.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And you know Jon Newsome very well. You play golf with him, James, and you know him so well that we could almost say cheerio to him, and you could be him, couldn't you? This.
Are you trying to make me do my Jon Newsome impression, Alan? Is that what you're trying to do?
Let's have a look. Yeah.
I didn't know about this. The cat's out of the bag, is it?
The cat's out of the bag. It looks like it. Well, cat's out of the bag a bit. It's like what it is. What it is. Big's into it.
There you go.
That's the first time I've ever done that in front of John. So I don't think he's too happy about it.
No, I don't mind that, mate. As Michael Hennigan always used to say to me when we were apprentices, if you can't laugh at yourself, you can't laugh at Noddy.
Imitation. I'm not going to try and repeat that, by the way, but imitation is the highest form of flattery, John. So just take that from what you will.
Will do. Thank you.
Absolutely. Can you do me yet? I bet you can't.
Oh, you just wheel out the best Alan Partridge impression, Alan, don't you? And hello, welcome along to Sheffield Live. And there we go. It's a nice Thursday evening.
Very good. Very good. So there's no need for me to be here, and there's no need for Jon Newsome to be here. The only one that we need is you and Mark Metcalf. Mark, respectable and respected football historian. I'm sorry about all that, mate. I'm sorry about all that.
Oh, that's fine. That's absolutely. As somebody who supports Sunderland, we're very definitely in Tier 3. I can tell. We've been in that for a little while, although we are slowly improving our defence and scoring the odd goal or two, which is meaning that we face the serious prospect of rising up to level 2 by the end of next season. Let's hope we're all out of Tier 1 as well across the country, but by the time that actually happens, of course. But yeah, Sunderland's definitely Tier 3 as it would be put. In terms of Ernest Needham, of course, he kicked off his career in Tier 2 with Sheffield United when the league was extended in 1892-93. There were two big sides in Sheffield at that particular period. Sheffield Wednesday were put into the first division when the league became Leagues 1 and 2. The League 1 became a larger league. Sheffield Wednesday, as the more established club, went into League 1, and Sheffield United went into League 2. Ernest Needham was a call. He left school at 13. And he went to work at the local pit. He didn't actually work down the mines, but he was a coal miner as such. And he was playing for a very successful local side in Staveley, who were capable of beating the big sides at that particular period, and did in fact beat Sheffield United when he was playing for them. And as Sheffield United sought to get into the league, they were picking up good local young players, and he was certainly amongst the best that they collected. And he went on to serve the club with great distinction. And he is the most successful player ever to play for Sheffield United.
Right. Well, with the Blades, he won the First Division title. That was in 1898. He also won the FA Cup twice, 1899 and 1902. So the most successful player in their history. That backs it up. He actually played cricket for Derbyshire as well. He was born in Chesterfield. Played cricket for Derbyshire. Yeah, remarkable.
Very talented footballer, and what it described as a great leader of men as well. He became the captain in 1894-95. So he was one of the youngest ever captains of Sheffield United. And he's not only was he, as you describe, a box-to-box player, he's called Nudger because of his ability to push players off the ball, which might sound a bit silly, but actually Sheffield United, in an era where weight did count, particularly at the start of the period of the 1890s, played with three halfbacks. Basically, by that period, it had become a situation where there were two fullbacks, three halfbacks, of which the centre-back tended to be the more skillful and directed the play. That wasn't always the case. Tommy Crawshaw played for Sheffield Wednesday centre-back, and he was not in that era. He was in the later era when we got used to the two-man offside rule, where the centre-half was all bustling, all action, less with the ball, certainly for quite some significant periods. But Needham, and he's played the game where he passed the ball well. Sheffield United sort of piloted the situation where long balls would be played out to the wingers, and Needham was very much part of that. And he directed the play from where he was, which was, to direct the play in any level of football marks you out as a particular talent in a way, because it's how the team plays. And he led the team very successfully. He was a great leader of the players and a never say die attitude. And they won the cup that twice. Many times they were actually in arrears, even with a couple of minutes to go, against Liverpool in the FA Cup semi-final. Fourth time they played them, 2-0 down with 8 minutes to go, came back and got a draw and got through to the final. He played some fantastic games of football. One of the best games he played undoubtedly was where he sort of dropped off in terms of directing the play to keep a mark on Steve Bloomer, who was the best goal scorer in this country until Jimmy Greaves came along. And he kept Bloomer quiet in the 1899 final. Bloomer might have scored, which would have given Sheffield Derby a 2-0 lead. When he failed to do that, Sheffield United's all-powering forward line in particular and the backs simply overpowered a very strong Derby County side and actually ended up winning the final by 4-1. They beat Derby. And in the book that we've produced, which is just on Ernest Needham's writings combined with an assessment of how he played the game along with the best games, Needham in these articles which we've taken and reproduced as part of the series of books that we're doing on these players, using their own words, adding 7,000 or 8,000 words of our own. We did one on Ambrose Langley, we did one on George Waller, phenomenal trainer for Sheffield United. His psychology is incredible. Waller's, the articles I was typing up, unbelievable, and that's out before Christmas as well. He basically said that Bloomer he'd sort of lost his temper. He hadn't managed to keep himself under control. And we were talking about this before. Football is a very combative sport, but it's also one where you need to keep control of your emotions as best you can. To try and ignore the crowd, it's difficult these days. We're wanting the crowds to come back, aren't we? So it's a different atmosphere to how to play the game. But in those days, as John will have seen, particularly, the crowd can get on top of you, it can intimidate you, the individuals can pick you out, they can make it a problem for you. Needham was the sort of man who went along and he played the game whereby he could get other people to play for him. And if you can do that, and if you can keep your control, you've got every opportunity of using the skills that you've got. Great footballer, Ernest Needham, really great footballer.
Yeah. Well, it sounds. I mean, that really sums him up, and you kind of do it without reference to any notes at all, which is quite incredible to me. A great performance, and the player himself described as both a constructive and destructive player. I tell you what, if Chris Wilder's watching this, John and James, he might be in touch. What do you reckon?
Yeah,
I'm struggling to hear you, Alan.
With a player like this in any era.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, I mean, wow. He sounds. By the way, Mark, on that, it does sound a great read, and they don't build footballers like that anymore, do they, John?
No, of course they don't. The game's changed, hasn't it? We're talking about it in the first part. They drop an eyelash. And I watched the Champions League last night, and Neymar, and he'd be better off a high board diving competition than playing on a football pitch. That lad.
Embarrassing. Yeah.
And of course, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think strikers forwards need to be protected. The more skill that's on show, the better. But I think we've got to the line where we've crossed it probably a little bit too far.
Yeah, indeed. We could do with more Ernest Needhams, not just for their ability, but it seems to me, John, and we talked about this with Kevin Gage on the show last week, that the non-league game that's attracting crowds, several hundred, and James will talk about that again in a minute, is setting an example for us all to follow in terms of we're getting back, John, to the purity of the game that we all love.
Absolutely, yeah. I think professional football has lost its way a little bit, and this pandemic has highlighted that. And I mean, you've only got to look at the news over the last 24 hours. The Premier League's in discussions with European teams to have a breakaway, and it's obscene. It's, for me, I think it's disgraceful. I think it's vulgar in its obscenity, really. And I grew up as a young lad in Sheffield, playing on, muddy pitches and trying to do your best, and thankfully made a career out of the game. And I think back then, the game was a bit more of a purity, a bit more of a proper game of football than it is now. Don't get me wrong. Things progress, and the pace and the speed and the professionalism of the players has probably increased, but is it for the better? I don't know if it is really. You've just said, I was at Hallam FC myself on Saturday, and the crowds are there. There's people having a pint. There's people having a pie. The game's going on. There's tackles flying in. Tackles that you would never see on a Saturday at the Championship or Premier League level. And I think people are sort of like going back to that and enjoying it for what it is, and much to the detriment of the professional game, I think. And I think as and when the lockdown does end and we do get supporters back into stadiums, I think there'll be a few that need enticing back if they end up going back.
Yeah, I agree. The habit can be broken, and people can be quite disillusioned with aspects of the game. We're going to talk about Sheffield United and a difficult start to the season very shortly with John. But we're going to go to James just before I do, just to recap that a week ago I had the pleasure of going for the very first time, ticking another non-league club off the list. I went to Oliver's Mount, the home of Handsworth. It was their former home as well. They've returned home after sort of 8 years away over in Worksop, which must have been very difficult for the supporters to tolerate that. But what a great setup it is there. They spent £1 million on their part of what is a big sports setup at Oliver's Mount. Loads of pitches. They've got a 3G pitch there, and £700,000 of the $1 million that was spent to get them back there was spent on that wonderful surface. I saw them beat Eccleshill United by 2-1, so I've got a 100% record. Very dramatic. They did so with playing with 10 men for all but 15 minutes of that after an early, very controversial sending off. And the manager, who's a real character, colourful character, called Russ Eagle, who'd been there before, very successful manager for them, he was sent off late on. So there's bits of everything there. And Steve Holmes, I met, a great guy who runs a lot of it behind the scenes. So a thoroughly pleasant experience, a warm welcome, and thank you to all. Meantime, more of that. Here's James.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say on that, Bigsy, I think because of the Tier 3 announcement, we won't be talking about ice hockey, basketball, or indeed Championship Rugby League for a while. So that means no Steelers, no Sharks, no Eagles, and also no Rugby Union as well. I know we talk about the Sheffield Tigers and Sheffield Rugby Union Football Club down at Abbeydale. It's just because of the regulations that the leagues have all agreed sort of amongst themselves, because they operate at 75% capacity at an absolute minimum to be able to function and run the club properly. In most cases, having spoken to a few general managers and stuff and on social media in the last few weeks, that it's just not going to be happening until lockdown restrictions are eased. So it's a real shame for those clubs. What I would say, though, on the plus side of it, if there is a plus side to come out of it, is what you've just been saying about the amazing non-league football scene, which I know we've talked about for years on this programme, and lots of people have been aware of it. It's not like some kind of new amazing discovery, I must say that. You know, they've always been very well attended Hallam games, very entertaining as well and very well run. But it's been brilliant. The fact that Hallam sold out in something like 42 minutes the other night for their game last night, when they went down to AFC Emley 2-1. A stunning strike from the left back. I think it's Burks, the left back. If you have a look on their social media channels, you can see that strike. It's a really good goal as well. Nice to hear some cheers as well, some actual crowds making some noises. It's just nice. It seems so strange, doesn't it? Rather than it being piped in over the TV as well. Postponed at the weekend were Penistone Church. They were meant to be playing against Goole. As we record this, sorry to give the game away, Bigsy. We don't know the result from taking on Leversedge at home tonight. Sheffield FC were knocked out in the FA Vars on Saturday to Runcorn. It was always going to be a tough ask as well, that one, but they gave a great account of themselves in front of a massive crowd as well. Club are away this weekend at Kidsgrove this coming Saturday. Stocksbridge, they got knocked out the Vars as well. They lost last night to Leek Town, but they're at home against Newcastle, the ones from Staffordshire, before you try and test me on my geography, Alan, as well, not from the northeastern parish. And we'll finish off, of course, with our two league sides. Blades with points on the board now in the Premier League after a draw against Fulham on Sunday. Liverpool, the opponents, on Saturday. Nice, easy run as well for the Blades coming up. And Wednesday picked up a great 3 points at St Andrews against Gary Monk's former side, Birmingham, at the weekend as well. Barry Bannon penalty in that one. They played against Brentford last night, but because this is a pre-record, I won't be able to tell you a score.
Yeah, it's awkward, isn't it? It's having to do these shows on Zoom on a Wednesday at the moment. Apart from the Gary Monk one, which we did on the Thursday, the very day it went out. So sorry if we're a bit out of date on some of our comments. One thing that might happen, depending on the Sheffield Wednesday Brentford result, is something I got into a little bit of hot water about on Twitter on Sunday, because I just noticed that if Sheffield Wednesday won their 2 games this week, they're at home again to Luton on Saturday. As of the point when I tweeted it, they would overtake Sheffield United, having started on -12, and they'd be on +2.
You know, when you tweeted that, Alan, what was going through your head?
I hadn't been drinking. Honestly, I hadn't been drinking. I was bored out of my mind, and I thought, well, you know, if I don't point this out, somebody else will. So
yeah,
I might.
Fair point.
And it went down quite well in half of the city, has to be said.
Yeah.
It didn't go down so well in the other half, but I wasn't being serious, really. I mean, it's just
it's all a bit of fun, isn't it? Yeah, all a bit of fun.
Anyway, Sheffield United, John. 1 point from 5 games, going to Liverpool. I mean, it's kind of sod's law, isn't it? Just when you want a game, a bit like Fulham, that was a game to win. Didn't quite do it. You get the feeling that they're not playing badly, actually, at all, and that the fine margins that were going for them at the beginning of last season are not going their way this time. Or is it a little bit deeper than that, do you think?
No, I think you're right. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's fine margins, simply as that. And I think last season it's the first year in the Premier League. It's probably the first for the majority of the squad. It was the first time they played in the Premier League. It's all exciting. I think, if my memory serves me right, didn't they get a late equaliser at Bournemouth on the first day, and then they came from 2-0 down at Chelsea and got a really good. Well, like results like that. I mean, the coach, or I'm assuming they come back on the coach. They come back on the train a lot of the time now, but the coach is bouncing back up the M1. It'd be like a bit of a party on the back of the bus, because you've got a point out of nothing. And if it just, I think the start, said about Sheffield Wednesday, the start for me is so important for Premier League and Championship sides. And here they are, 1 point on the board. It's going to be tough. It is going to be tough. But they go to Liverpool. Does anybody give them any hope? Outside of Sheffield United supporters, obviously Chris and the squad, is it a bit of a free hit? Maybe it is. Do they go there, put in a good performance, get a result? All of a sudden, the confidence starts lifting a little bit, and for me, that's all it is. It's fine margins and confidence and that togetherness. And when you're going into games knowing you're not going to get beat, which I think they did last year, it's a different mindset to possibly going into games this year where we hope we're not going to get beat, as opposed to we know we're not going to get beat. And like I say, it might be, you're talking 1 or 2%, which is the difference. And also, I think sometimes you've got to have a little bit of luck as well, haven't you? I've watched their games, and things haven't fallen for them, and keepers keep pulling off these marvellous saves every time they should score a goal. And so sometimes things just don't go for you. The ball doesn't run for you, and that's where Chris earns his money and his staff earns his money, because they've got to keep that dressing room bubbling and the positivity within there. And he'll do that. We know you know him, I know him. Greggy knows him. We know what character he is. There'll be no stone left unturned in his desire to turn it around.
Yeah, and in terms of no stone left unturned, Sheffield United, relatively for the size for the club in its history, have spent a lot of money. It would appear on the surface, but in Premier League terms, they haven't. And I think it's coming to a critical point, in the approach to the January window. They may have to go out and break that transfer record again in order to stay in the Premier League. I've written a column in the Sheffield Telegraph this week. I'm pretty convinced that Chris Wilder will go for David Brooks in quite a big way, if he can, in the January window. I think he feels it's pretty vital to land a player like him to add something in the second part of the season. Would you agree with that, John? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a bit like sod's law, isn't it? That they go out and they spend decent, good money. I mean, like you said, for Sheffield United, wind the clock back 24 months or 36 months when they're in Division 1 or just got into the Championship, and you're talking about them spending 23 million quid on Brewster and 18 million quid on a keeper, and your eyes would have popped out at the time. So relatively, yes, it's big money for the football club, but in real terms, is it big money for the Premier League? And then all of a sudden, what happens? Jack O'Connell gets a season-long injury. It's sod's law, isn't it? You need to try and plug that gap as well. But Chris always talks about it, and I'm in full agreement. It's what happens at the top of the pitch for me. It's the difficult part of playing football, professional football at that level, is putting the ball in the back of the net, creating chances and scoring goals. My job as a defender was far easier than a striker's or an advanced player's, because all you do is you're breaking things down, you're getting in the way. To be creative is more difficult, and quality at the top of the pitch in the Premier League comes at a price. It really, really does. And they've not scored a lot of goals, whether that's a bit of luck, bad finishing, not creating enough chances. I don't know what there's a multitude of reasons, but the more you can develop and the more options you've got at the top of the field, I just feel the more chances you've got of winning the game.
And that's what costs the most money. And I think it's pretty much beyond United to bring in a proven Premier League goal scorer on the fee and the wages, more specifically, that a player.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about that fine balance, isn't it, Alan? Early in the programme we talked about Sheffield Wednesday and what they've done, 3-4 years ago, and threw a load of money at players and spent big and had a massive wage bill, and guess what? It fell down like a house of cards. So it's not really the way to go. There's a fine balance that you've got to achieve, and it's difficult because you're striving and you're yearning to be successful, but you've also got to look in your rear view mirror and take heed of what's happening in the landscape of football. So yeah, it's very, very difficult balance for everybody concerned, I think.
Absolutely. Thanks very much indeed, John, for your comments on both Sheffield clubs. You work as a pundit now and again. And James, thank you very much indeed for your input on the roundup. And Mark as well, talking about Ernest Needham and about Jimmy Lang, in historic figures in Sheffield football. And just before we go, and very briefly, Mark, I know you could lecture for about half an hour, but in about a minute, can you talk to me about somebody called Jasper Redfern? Just 1 minute left of the show.
Okay, very briefly. First off, the book on Ernest Needham is called Prince of Halfbacks. It can be bought from Amazon for a tenner. Jasper Redfern took lots of photographs of Ernest Needham, Billy Falk and Fred Spikesley. He also is the man who took the first cinematic pieces of action at Bramall Lane, which people will have seen. He was a famous photographer, cinematographer, but he also was instrumental to the development of X-rays. He lost his fingers, in essence, by refining them, and he lost his life. He was born in 1871. He died in 1921. And myself and Martin Westby had discussed getting a blue plaque placed up not too far from the town hall in Sheffield on the 150th anniversary of his birth. We don't actually know. We just know it was in 1871 and the 100th anniversary of his death in Sheffield. And we'd like to see that happen next year. Anybody keen to be involved, please get in contact with me.
Thank you very much. A mine of information and another Sheffield football figure that we should celebrate. And there's so much out there. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much indeed. Mark Metcalf, James Gregg, Jon Newsome. Thank you to you for watching. Do hope you can rejoin us for our next show. See you then. Bye-bye.